Ambassador Haley, thank you so much for joining us for our NBC News Des Moines Register Closing Arguments Iowa series.
Thanks for having me.
Ambassador, welcome to the Des Moines Register newsroom. We are 10 days away from the Iowa caucuses, almost in single digits. So let's get into it. You said this week that Iowa will start this process and then New Hampshire will correct it. What do you say to Iowa caucus goers who take this process really seriously and maybe felt that their voices were being dismissed?
It was all in fun. You know, I mean, look, it has been 11 months of me doing this. Over 150 town halls, answering every question, shaking every hand, being the last person to leave. If you come to our town halls, we have fun when we're talking about the Q&A. Not only that, I was governor of an early state, South Carolina. We had a pact. Iowa was always going to be the first caucus. New Hampshire was always going to be first in the nation. South Carolina was going to be the first in the South. And we would banter against each other. That's all this is. And, you know, I think that's the problem with politics. People take it all so seriously. We can have some fun too. It's okay. And so, yeah, it was all said and fun. Anybody that was there, we had 700 people in the crowd. They all got a good laugh out of it. You know, in the times that we do something here in Iowa, we'll do something and have some fun with that too. But I think you got to have fun when you're doing this.
And jokes aside, I mean, do you think that Iowa's result, there will be something that you'll need to correct in New Hampshire?
No, I think, look, we are putting everything we've got into Iowa, but we're not just picking one state. We're working hard in Iowa, we're working hard in New Hampshire, we're going to work hard in South Carolina. We want to earn everybody's vote. And you can see, no one can outwork me in this race. No one can outsmart me in this race because I think we have a country to save. And so we're putting everything we've got. We don't know what's going to happen with Iowa. I don't think the media pundits know what's, you know, they think they know, but I don't think we know what's going to happen in Iowa. I don't think we know what's going to happen in New Hampshire, but I think Americans know. And they know they want a new generational leader. And they know they don't want to keep living the way they're living right now. And 75% of them have said they don't want to see a Trump-Biden rematch. And that's why I think we're getting the traction that we're getting.
Well, right now, an average of caucus polling shows that you're at about 16% right now here in Iowa. That's third place behind Donald Trump, behind Ron DeSantis. You've said, you've told the Des Moines Register in an interview that a good showing for you on caucus night would be as long as you look strong on caucus night. That will be a win for you. But can any candidate look strong if they finish in double digits behind Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of many states. This is the start of the process. And so I think the goal is for us, we want to be strong in Iowa, we want to be strong in New Hampshire, we want to be strong in South Carolina. But the media wants to go and define what's happened before it's even happened. And that's what Americans don't want. They're making their decisions right now. They don't know, so it doesn't matter what numbers are being shown. They did the same thing 6 months ago. They were writing obituaries for everybody. You can't do that. The people don't want media telling them what's going to happen. They want to be able to do this, and you respond to what they did. And that's what I think has been the most disheartening in the process, is everybody's writing things off. You can't write off the American spirit. You can't write off the fact that they're upset with the economy and they know that it's got to be fixed. You can't write off the fact that only 31% of 8th graders in our country can read. You can't write off the fact that we have an open border that is out of control. And you can't write off the fact that the world is on fire. They want to know that there's going to be someone that comes forward with no negativity, no baggage, no vendettas, not taking things personally, but going to move forward with real solutions. And I think that's why we're getting the attention we're getting.
So would a third place finish here be strong enough for you?
We want to be strong. You don't know what it looks like. Like, I can't go and predict. We have to see where everybody falls. What I want is to be strong. Y'all will decide whether it's strong. Once the numbers come in, you can decide whether it's strong. But we're giving it everything we've got until the last day.
Governor DeSantis told us in our interview yesterday that you can't get conservative voters. He said you're, quote, playing for voters are not even core Republicans. And according to a Des Moines Register NBC News poll, Republican caucus goers do say that you're too moderate for them. But look, I know you came up in the Tea Party movement. You've been a budget hawk when it comes to curtailing government spending. You govern a southern state. So given all of that, why aren't you doing better among conservatives?
I am doing fine among conservatives.
But look at the numbers.
You're going to see that. I'm telling you, just because my opponents say something doesn't make it real.
But it's not just the opponents, it's also the polling.
Look at my record. I don't care what anybody says. I am a hardcore conservative. I always have been. I've been a fiscal conservative. You saw I ran a socially conservative state. At the UN, we cut $1 billion off the budget, so they can say whatever they want. What I can tell you is that everything I've ever done, I've fought for. Everything I've ever done has been about results, and everything I've ever done is try to get people to see the best in themselves to go forward. And that's what I'll continue to do. And I'm trying to get everybody. The problem is Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That's the problem with politics. We shouldn't be proud of that. We should want to win the majority of Americans. Am I trying to win the majority? You bet. Because the only way we're going to save our country is if we go after everybody, if we focus on lifting up everybody, not just a select few. And that's what I'm going to do. And so, yes, is that conservatives? Yes. Is that moderates? Yes. Is that independents? Yes. I want them all. And the country should want them all. And that's the problem with the Republican Party is they're picking just a sliver and they're not looking at everybody. And that's why people have left the party.
But that is the reality of the party today. So are you perhaps then not the right candidate for the Republican Party of today?
Why don't you wait and see when the polls come out? Why don't you wait and see on Election Day and tell me if I'm not the right candidate?
Well,
because everybody's going to be surprised to see that maybe it's the media that doesn't read the Republican Party right, and maybe the Americans are going to set the record straight and show them what they want to see in a Republican candidate.
Well, you are polling much closer to former President Trump, though, in New Hampshire than you are in your home state of South Carolina. Do you think you can win your home state?
I think that we'll be strong in South Carolina. What I know is South Carolinians, they're smart. They don't support someone just because you're from there. They want you to earn it. They want you to fight for it. And so what they're going to do is they're going to see how I do in Iowa. They're going to see how I do in New Hampshire. And if they see there's a path, they're going to reward me for it. But they're not going to just give their vote away. They want to see that the person they put their support behind is going to take it for the long haul. South Carolina has always looked at the fact that they're the long-term they take the long-term winner and want to see them become president. That's how they watch it. So they watch everything that happens. This is a process. Iowa starts it, New Hampshire continues it, South Carolina continues it to go to Super Tuesday, and it plays out. There's a lot of road here still.
You said you'll be strong in South Carolina, but if you can't win your home state, should you drop out of the race? How can you argue viability long term if you can't win your home state?
Why don't we wait and see what happens in South Carolina before we talk about that? I mean, I think we haven't even had Iowa yet. We haven't had New Hampshire yet. And you want to talk about South Carolina?
But it's your home state.
It is my home state, and I'm proud of my home state. My home state's proud of me. You can look at the favorabilities, and it's good. Why don't you let and see what Iowa happens and what New Hampshire happens, and we'll show you what happens in
South Carolina is Trump country. I spent time there. I talked to voters. It has changed since when you were governor. It's gotten a lot more red. Trump has brought out new conservative voters that weren't voting when you were governing that state.
I mean, look, if you want to say Trump's going to win South Carolina, you can say that. I'm fighting every day to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm fighting every day to make sure that doesn't happen in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in South Carolina.
Can you survive this race, though, if you don't win it?
I will survive and win this race. I will finish this race. And I can't wait to show every person in the media that y'all tried to predict this from the very beginning, and you got it wrong because you didn't listen to normal Americans. You didn't listen to the fact that they are hurting. You sat there and played political politics in a time where, look, we've got to get back to the basics in this country. Americans are tired of working for government. They want government to serve them. They're tired of talking about politics and personalities. That's what's wrong. You look at Congress, they come up with legislation, they put it down. Everybody wants to know whose it is before they decide whether to support it. That's everything that's wrong with politics. Why don't we start talking about the country for a change? Why don't we start talking about who's got the best policy solutions? Why don't we talk about who's working the hardest? Why don't we talk about who is spending their cash in their campaign smarter than anybody else and making the biggest difference in the polls? That's when you start talking about that, that's when you'll tap into what the American people are saying.
I want to ask about something you said last night. You said many of the cases facing Donald Trump are just political, but there are some he'll have to answer for. Which things do you think Donald Trump will have to answer for?
Well, I think he's got a lot of court cases. He's going to have to answer all of them. But I think we can look at them. Some have been over-politicized. We see what's happened in New York, and we see what they're doing. And then some, they're going to have to be played out. But throughout this year, we're going to watch every single court case. And look, he's innocent until he's proven guilty. He'll have to figure that out. I don't have to deal with those court cases. I'm glad about that. We've got a country to save. That's where my focus is going to be.
Do you think there's a chance he'll be found guilty of some of those alleged crimes?
I don't worry about it. Like, for me, I want to beat him fair and square. I'm not looking for him to fall in a court case. I'm not looking for him to be thrown off a ballot. I want to beat him because I don't think he's the right person to go forward. I don't think that you defeat Democrat chaos with Republican chaos. I don't think that we can have someone go in 4 more years with the chaos that he brings. And so I think that we have to go and make sure that we get stable. I'm doing this because I don't want my kids to live like this. No one else wants their kids to live like this. We want them to live in a country that feels safe, that's strong, and that is full of opportunities. We've got to get back to that.
But we do live in a reality right now where we have a front runner who is facing 91 felony counts, right? So if former President Trump is convicted, and if he does win the nomination, will you stand by him at the convention?
I mean, you're talking about a lot of ifs. What I can tell you is if you're asking if I'm going to support him if he's the nominee, absolutely. Because we cannot handle a President Kamala Harris.
Can you support a nominee that's running behind bars?
Well, you're acting like the American people are going to do that. I trust the American people.
But it's not the American people, it's a court system.
I trust the American people to make a good decision and decide whether he's the person to go forward. I also trust the American people that they don't want to see a rematch between President Trump and President Biden. And I also trust the American people that they think Biden has not served them well. So I know the American people are going to do the right thing. And I trust them to do that. And so what I'll tell you is, do I think Trump would be better than a President Kamala Harris? Absolutely. That should send a chill up everybody's spine. But let's wait until we get to that point. Again, you're talking about ifs. Let's get through Iowa.
You are able to say you support him if he's the nominee. So if he's the nominee and is convicted, will you support him?
Every person is innocent until proven guilty. I have said that if he is the Republican nominee, I will support him over Biden every day of the week.
I understand, and we can move on here because there is another question that I want to see if you might be able to just categorically put to rest, because I know you've been asked about this. And yesterday in our interview, DeSantis accused you of running to be the vice president, saying in our interview, quote, she's the darling of the never-Trumpers, and yet when she's asked, okay, will you just categorically put this to bed and say you will not accept the vice presidential nomination, she will not answer the question. When you've been asked this in other interviews, you say you're not playing for second. I understand that, but if Trump asked, will you say yes or no?
The reason I don't answer that question is I don't play my opponent's games. I am running my own race. They want me to do that so that you guys talk about it for the next 2 days. I am not running to be vice president. I have said that in every way I know possible. I don't play for second. I've never done it in my life. I'm not doing it now. You don't put yourself, your family, and everything that goes into running for president to be second. And so we are going to be first. And we're not even going to have to answer that question. I have said I do not want to be vice president.
But
I want to be
said
president.
Yes or no, and I think that's
you know
what
why?
Keep asking.
Because who's asking it? Ron DeSantis is asking
Well, no,
it. Chris
I'm
Christie.
asking it.
Because they asked it. I'm not playing my opponent's game. And then have you guys make a story of it for 2 to 3 days? No, I want to talk about the economy. I want to talk about education. I want to talk about the border.
Because you haven't said yes or no. DeSantis has said categorically no. Why can't you do the same?
I have said I don't play for second. I have said I am not trying to be vice president for anyone.
So
that should be enough. I am running for president. When 6 months from now, I'm happy to talk to you about who's going to be my vice president.
Would
but
you
I am not going to sit
DeSantis
there
as a running mate?
Maybe.
Would you join forces to try to defeat Donald Trump?
I am going to defeat Donald Trump on my own. That's the goal that we have. If he wants to join forces with me, I welcome that. But right now, we've got a race that we feel good about. We've got a surge. We've got momentum. We've had hundreds of people show up at our events. We're doing well in Iowa. We're doing well in New Hampshire. We're going to keep on fighting.
New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has endorsed your campaign, said recently that there's no doubt that if Chris Christie stays in this race, he'll risk diminishing your share of the vote and make a Donald Trump nomination more inevitable. Do you think Chris Christie should drop out of the race if he really believes that Donald Trump should not be the nominee?
I'll never tell anyone to get out of the race. I mean, it's personal to get into a race. It's personal to get out of the race. That's for him to decide. I will say that his reason for getting into this was that he wanted to call Trump out. And his reason for getting into this was that he was going to go and follow Trump around the country and try and, make him answer questions. He hasn't done that. He's not playing in Iowa. He's not playing in South Carolina. If he wants to defeat Trump, I think he can see exactly how you do that. But that's for him to see, and that's for him to decide. I'm not going to tell anybody to get out of the race. I'm just going to run my own.
So do you think it's disingenuous of him for him to stake so much of his candidacy on defeating Donald Trump and then to continue in this race?
I think it's left everybody scratching their heads, saying, you know, you say you want to defeat Trump, yet you might be the one person that helps him win. I mean, he's got to answer that question, not me.
When Donald Trump came second in the Iowa caucuses in 2016 to Ted Cruz, he claimed without evidence that it had been stolen. He claimed that the Iowa caucuses were rigged. Do you have faith in Iowa's caucus process, and will you accept the results?
I absolutely have faith in Iowa's caucus, and I think that we need to go through this in a way that we're conscious about the fact that everybody's trying to do what they can. During COVID, we had a lot of mess and chaos and things that happened where secretaries of state were making decisions without their legislatures, and we had some mail-out balloting and things like that. A lot of states have tried to make things right. We have no reason to think that the caucus isn't going to go the way it should.
And more broadly, I mean, to that point, do you think it's now time to move on past this period of not accepting electoral outcomes? And if Biden does win in November, would you accept those results?
Well, first of all, I passed voter ID in South Carolina. I mean, I think we need to make sure we always do what it takes to protect the integrity of the election process. There are a few states that haven't done that yet. We've got to make sure that we are constantly saying, what else can we do to give faith to the American people that this system works? I saw at the United Nations. If a population suddenly loses faith in their election system, bad things happen. So we need to always say, are we doing enough to make sure people can trust this? And I think that we've seen a lot of states really step up and do that. I think there are a few more states that we need to focus on. There's no reason we shouldn't get results to an election on election day. That's got to happen. There's no reason we shouldn't be verifying every person that comes to vote with a picture ID to make sure they are who they are. There's no reason that we should be mailing out ballots randomly. We should make sure that there's a process for absentee and that you verify signatures. So every state needs to do that. But yes, I think a lot have done well. I am assuming that we're going to have an election that is fair, that is strong, and that people can be proud of.
So you're confident you will be able to accept the results in November?
Yeah, of course.
You said you would pardon former President Trump. Why do you think that's the best decision for the country?
Well, first of all, if you're talking about a pardon, then you're saying that he's guilty. So he is innocent until proven guilty. We'll find out. But when you talk about a pardon, you're talking about someone who's already been found guilty. The goal of a leader and a president is to make sure that you move your country forward. I don't think that we will move our country forward if we have an 80-year-old president sitting in a jail cell. I think the country will continue to be divided. For the good of the country, we should want to move forward so that we no longer talk about him. And the only way to do that is you pardon him and you let him go away, and then we go forward. But I think it would keep our country completely divided if we did that. You look at what happened with Nixon. It's the same thing. You have to do what's in the best interest of the country.
In that same spirit, then, if you were in the Oval Office, would you urge Republicans to stand down on their investigations into President Biden to prevent the country from going through more turmoil?
Well, I think there's more questions than answers with Biden. And so if they're not getting it from the Department of Justice, they have every right to ask the questions they need to ask to make sure everything was above board. And so they have the right to do that. And I think they have the ability to do that.
They're not same situation, an 80-year-old man who's out of office. Why put the country through more division?
Because they aren't finding him guilty yet. They're just asking questions.
Well, Trump's not been found guilty yet either.
Right. They're asking questions. Everybody should be able to ask questions. We should never say someone's guilty until we've asked the questions. But American people want to know. With Biden, they want to know, how did he get this money? Did he do anything to get this money? Did this money, did he do something to help his son or help his brother or help his sister? Those are legitimate questions for Americans to ask. The same way they're going to ask questions of Trump. Let those situations play out, but you can't say, no, we're not going to ask someone. You have to ask those questions. You have to give the American people the answers they need. Maybe they'll find him guilty, maybe they won't. But asking the questions, that's a good thing. We should always want transparency in everything.
What about Hunter Biden, a president's kid? If he were convicted, would you pardon him?
I mean, I'm not even going to think about that. I don't even know what they've found him guilty on yet. I know that they've, what we've seen in the Department of Justice system, if anything, is they're not treating everybody fairly. You look at how the Bidens and the Clintons have been treated, it's very different than how the Trumps have been treated. Everybody should be treated the same. If you do a crime, you should pay the price, period. You should have transparency. Everybody should see what's happening. We should make sure that taxpayers know that everything is above board. That's what this is. Doesn't matter what party, it doesn't matter what person, but treat everybody exactly the same. That's where we should go. I'm not going to get into whether we pardon Hunter Biden or not. Let's wait and see what the charges are. But at this point, you have to go and look at every case individually, and I don't think it's responsible just to throw out whether you would do something like that on someone's son when we don't know all the details of that issue.
And I do just want to ask, because the anniversary of January 6th is tomorrow. What lessons do you think the country learned from January 6th, and what did you personally take away from that day?
It's a terrible day. We can never let that happen again. I don't know anybody that saw what happened that didn't have their heart fall to their stomach. We just don't want to see that happen again. And I think that we owe it, all of us, to make sure that doesn't happen again. Now, I will say, you had a lot of people show up at the Capitol. Not everybody did something wrong. A lot of them went and were using freedom of speech and their ability to protest to do what they wanted. But the ones that went in, the ones that broke the law, those are the ones you have to hold them accountable. You have to make sure that they pay the price to show that it will never happen again. That's the only way we can make sure that that doesn't.
Governor, I want to ask you about your approach to the media here in Iowa. Unlike many of your competitors, you're not taking questions from reporters at your campaign events. This is something that Republicans have been really critical of Joe Biden for hiding from the media. Your opponent, Ron DeSantis, takes questions at nearly every campaign event here. Why don't you?
Because we open the questions up to the people. I mean, the press is allowed in every one of our events. We've done over 150 town halls. We answer questions from the crowd. There's no screening of questions. We take questions from Democrats. We take questions from Republicans. We take questions from independents. And the press has the right to listen to those questions and listen to those answers. So we are very much focused on the people, and we allow the press to come along and see everything that's happening. I sit down with interviews like this, and we do it in a systematic basis, but our focus has very much been on the people. And so as much as the press wants to report that, we welcome it. We will always do that. You can look at my time in South Carolina. I over-communicated with the people of South Carolina. We were constantly giving them the information we had so they could make good decisions. You can look at my time at the UN. I over-communicated what we were working on every day at the UN with the press, and you'll see me as president. We will over-communicate. You won't have to beg me to do a press conference. You won't have to beg me to give you information. You want to give the public as much information as you have and let them know what you want to do and why you want to do it going forward. And that's the president I'll be.
So if you're elected as president, you'll do more press conferences than Joe Biden does?
Oh, without question. Without question. The problem now is what you see is Joe Biden's telling people to support Ukraine, but he's not telling them why. Joe Biden's saying, oh, we have a good economy, but he's not answering the questions on what got us into this situation, the fact that people are hurting. You have to be able to answer to the American people in order to move forward, and he hasn't done that.
Well, I want to turn us now to a serious topic. Here in Iowa this week, our newsroom has covered the community is still dealing with a school shooting that happened in Perry, Iowa, just outside of Des Moines yesterday. 1 student was killed, 5 more were injured. As a parent, what do you say to Iowa parents who woke up this morning and were concerned about whether they should send their kids to schools, whether it's safe?
It's every parent in America now. I mean, you turn on the TV and this is heartbreaking. I mean, my son-in-law is a 5th grade elementary school teacher. My son is a senior in college. I worry about college campuses. My daughter's a pediatric nurse at a hospital. There's not a morning I don't wake up worried about my kids and go to bed worried about my kids. And I think what happened in Perry is devastating. And I can relate it to the fact that I had a school shooting in Townville, South Carolina, and we lost a 6-year-old, Jacob Hall, to a shooter. And I sat with his parents in the hospital when they were wondering if he was going to make it. There is no way to explain what that experience is like. And there's no way to say you don't want to do everything you can to make sure no other parent goes through that. That is why we have got to literally take control of the cancer that's mental health. No, everybody talks about it as an issue. We have to deal with it as a cancer. 1 in 3 people have a mental health issue. But if treated, they can live a perfectly normal life. But we don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough treatment centers. We don't have enough addiction centers. And if you're lucky enough to get one of those 3, insurance doesn't cover it.
But all of those things take money, and you've said that you want to take the federal budget back to pre-COVID levels, which necessitates federal spending cuts. How do you find space in the federal budget for these types of things? How do you implement those policies when, congressional Republicans, when you yourself say, spending bills at this point are not necessarily where you want to go?
Because it's not what you spend, it's how you spend. You don't spend it on earmarks and pet projects like Republicans and Democrats opened back up after 10 years. You don't spend it on having 70% of federal employees still working from home 3 years after COVID. You don't spend it by having 75% of most of our agencies sitting empty that taxpayers are paying for. You don't spend it by all of this wasteful stimulus money that has gone in, where 1 out of every $7 was spent fraudulently and not go back and get it. Like, every single agency is bloated, big, bureaucratic, and has wasteful spending in it. That's why we will take as many federal programs as we can and put them down at the state level. It will reduce the size of the federal government. But guess what else it'll do? It'll give resources like things like mental health and education and welfare, and give it to the states so that they can best protect their people. They can best support the services that are needed. Not some DC bureaucrat that never sees those parents, talks to those parents, or knows their schools.
So for the Perry families who woke up this morning with this fear, can you promise them that if you're elected, those policies will be implemented, that they will see that as a result of your presidency?
Mental health, absolutely. We will make sure mental health is a priority for our kids, for our young adults, for everyone. We're seeing more anxiety, stress, and depression than we ever have. We have got to deal with it. We're losing Americans every day because of it. And if you turn on the TV and you see another shooting, over 80% of the mass shootings we've had, the shooter has been in a mental health crisis. We have to do something. We can't just blame it when it goes on TV. We have to say, what are we doing to stop it in the first place? I will absolutely do that.
And Ambassador, in the closing days of the Trump presidency, the administration considered a rule to change the 1964 Civil Rights Act that would have redefined racial, ethnic, and gender discrimination so that it would only be illegal if the discrimination could be proven to be intentional. If you're elected president, would you leave the Civil Rights Act entirely intact?
I need to look at that. So who wants to change it?
The Trump administration was trying to change the Civil Rights Act to make it so that the discrimination would only be illegal if it was proven to be intentional. But my question to you is simpler than that. Would you leave the 1964 Civil Rights Act entirely intact, or is there any change you would like to make to it?
I don't have any reason to change it, but I would look into that and get you a further answer.
And to the point of what you talked about last night, You've been asked about your comments on slavery. We don't need to rehash that. But there were some critics that criticized your comments last night about having black friends as sort of using a trope. What do you say to people who say that you've really had challenges when it comes to talking about race and are worried about what that would mean for the general election?
We were the only Indian family in our small southern town. I was teased every day for being brown. So anyone that wants to question it can go back and look at what I've said on how hard it was to grow up in the Deep South as a brown girl. Anybody can look at my record and see when Walter Scott was shot down by a dirty cop, how I made sure that the Walter Scott family didn't suffer because we put the first body camera bill in the country in place. Anybody can look at the fact that when we had 9 amazing souls die in Mother Emanuel Church, I did something that no Republican or Democrat ever wanted to touch, which was call for the Confederate flag to come down because it would take 2/3 of the House and Senate and was an impossible feat. I don't know what you're implying with that, but what I will tell you is saying that I had black friends is a source of pride. Saying that I had white friends is a source of pride. If you want to know what it was like growing up, I was disqualified from a beauty pageant because I wasn't white or black, because they didn't know where to put me. So look, I know the hardships, the pain that come with racism. It's the reason that I fight bullies every day when it comes to racism, anti-Semitism, or hate, and I always will. If I didn't mention slavery on that day, it's because that's an automatic. There's always been, the Civil War's always been known about slavery. I misread it and thought he was looking for a bigger answer going forward. So critics can say whatever they want. I'm very comfortable in my skin. I'm very comfortable with what I believe in, and my job is not to convince them.
No, and I understand it. And your personal story is very powerful, and you have taken a lot of action. You've talked about South Carolina, but rhetoric does matter. And
what rhetoric have I done?
What you've said on the campaign trail, the slavery comments.
No, the fact that I didn't mention slavery right off the bat, and the next day I said I should have. I should have said slavery.
When people worry about your fluency with this issue on the campaign trail, what do you say to those critics?
That no one in any town hall has asked me about it, that only the media has asked me about it. Literally no one has said anything about my comments. I mean, you can go find if anybody cares about that. People know my record, and no one says that I have a problem talking about it. I grew up in the South. You grow up living it. There's no issue of talking about it. Every day we learned it early. We talked about it often. I mean, that's the way you grow up in South Carolina. We're not shy about that issue. We're very aware of the history in South Carolina, and we're very respectful of it, and the fact that there are lessons to learn, and we never want to go back to the stains that it caused.
And lastly, I know we have to wrap up. I just want to ask you about the issue of immigration, because I know that's been a really big part of your platform. It's a top concern for voters here in Iowa and Republican voters across the country. The former president just released an ad attacking you on the issue of immigration, trying to tie your record with President Biden. If you were to win and head into the White House, to what extent would you pursue the anti-immigration agenda of the Trump administration? I'm talking border wall, child separation, Muslim ban. How far would you push on the anti-immigration agenda?
Well, first of all, I passed one of the toughest anti-illegal immigration laws in the country when I was governor of South Carolina. And when Trump says that I didn't want the border wall, that's not what I said. What I said is a border wall is not enough. You have to do more than that. That's why I've said I will take my state law and make it national. We'll do a national e-verify and make sure that businesses have to show that who they hire is in this country legally. We'll put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job.
We will defund force like DeSantis?
I'm sorry?
Would you consider lethal force like DeSantis?
For the cartels? If we have to go send special operations in there to take out the drug cartels and those that are trafficking, yes, we will absolutely do that. Mexico doesn't deal with it, we'll deal with it. But we'll also go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that no one steps foot on U.S. soil. And instead of catch and release, you got to do catch and deport. We have to stop the incentives and the danger of the trek that they're making on people coming here. So no, I don't think Trump did enough when it comes to the border. I think America's acting like it's September 10th, and we better remember what September 12th felt like. It is an absolute dereliction of duty what's happening right now, and the people in America are just waiting and holding their breath for something bad to happen. And it's on everybody who always said they were going to do something and they didn't do it. Trump said that he'd secure the border. He didn't do it. I will make sure that we secure the border and we stop everything that's happening coming in.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's a great day in Iowa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.